Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. Right now I am cutting tulips for cut flowers because they're absolutely perfectly coming into season right now. And this is all a very normal part of my day job because for the last year I've been working as the head gardener here at Sharpham Trust in Devon. And these are our cut flower beds here in the walled kitchen garden. Getting successful tulips for cut flowers is as much about choosing the right ones when you buy them as it is about cutting them. So the lovely long stem cultivars is always best for any kind of cut flower, and then cutting them as long as you can just to give you versatility. You can always cut them shorter when you want to, but if you have them long, when you're doing your arrangements, you can pick and choose a bit more. And they're just going straight into a bucket of water as that prolongs their life in a vase. Coming up on today's programme.
Toby visits a grower who, like me, has a passion for organic gardening and some nifty ways of keeping pests at bay.
I cover the figs before they actually start to ripen with a bag, and it actually protects them. Oh, cheers.
You know, that's such a good trick.
Yeah, it does work, and it's so easy to do.
We meet a gardener playing pyrotechnics with pot plants.
Boom! The flowers start to go one by one and you've got a firework display going on.
In London, we catch up with an inspiring woman growing an unusual range of heirloom veg on a small urban plot.
Each individual nodule can be broken apart as if it was an individual tomato. So if you give a child this whole tomato, they can eat it as and when they're ready, which is just absolutely fantastic.
And I've got some very exciting news to share with you. After years of dreaming and saving, I finally bought my first little house and I have my own garden, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
Here in Devon, the weather can be unpredictable. And when the heavy rain sets in, I'm grateful for the warmth of a dry greenhouse here at Sharpham Trust where I work.
The amazing luxury of having a greenhouse means I can store tender plants. Now, for years I've been collecting pelargoniums, and because I've sort of moved around a bit over the past few years, I've always had to stick them in my mum's garden or friends' gardens, make some makeshift frost protection for them. But this year I've been able to store them all in here in the glass house in an unused space under our propagation bench, and they've been so happy in here that they've actually started flowering already.
When the weather warms up, I'm looking forward to finding a space for my collection in my new garden. And hopefully, by the winter, I may even have a greenhouse of my own to store them in.
These are either species pelargoniums, so the South African natives, or they're the scented leaf varieties, which are incredible. So things like this tomentosum, really tactile foliage, which is very, very furry and soft, but it has an intense smell. It's one of the strongest smelling scented leaf pelargoniums. It's almost kind of minty. This is Sidoides, which has got a really deep maroon flower. They're really stunningly beautiful, a nice delicate scent. So the best time to take cuttings of pelargoniums is in September, and I did that, have stored them all in here, and now they're all in desperate need of some TLC. So what I have at the moment is these cuttings, which are ridiculously tall and leggy, and they'll grow like that perfectly happily, but they'll sprawl all over the place and never look fantastic. So if I cut them all back and pop them on, it will give them the best chance to be really nice, neat plants for the summer. I'm using roughly a 50-50 mix of sand and peat-free potting compost because pelargoniums need really, really good drainage. Now, pelargoniums can be cut back quite hard in the spring. So if I take this one right down to here, you may be tempted to go straight into a really lovely big pot, but actually plants can really sulk when you do that. They just don't seem to like it. Instead, if you incrementally increase their size, wait for the roots to hit the edges of the pots and then pot them up again, it's much better for plant growth. Now when you pot up anything or plant out anything, you have to give it a water so the roots can connect with the soil and begin to grow. But pelargoniums don't like to be too wet. So I'll water these now and then let them almost fully dry out before I water them again. And that's that. It doesn't look the most beautiful thing now, but you can already see these shoots just forming in the leaf axils there. They'll cover this plant and you won't see this cut at all in a few weeks' time. I'll leave them in the glass house to grow on a little bit and then harden them off and put them out and around the garden. Another great thing about having a greenhouse to have access to is that I'm able to grow tender edibles and tender herbs here as well. So I'm growing lots of things for the kitchens here, things like tarragon, which you may not think of as being tender, but you try and leave this outside for the winter and it won't grow back again. I'm also growing wasabi here. It's the first year I've grown this, so we'll see how that does. But the lovely thing is that the whole ethos of Sharpham is healing people through plants and through nature. And me and my love for medicinal herbs has meant that over the years I've grown loads of interesting things that I'm able to now bring in. So this is African bulbine, which is used as a sort of alternative to aloe. But if I snap off a piece, you can squeeze the flesh and gel comes out of those leaves. Fantastic for burned or sunburned skin. It's also incredibly beautiful. Look at those flowers. Now, these ones are for me. These are 3 little fruit trees that I've got. This one is a patio almond. This is the first time I've ever grown an almond, so I'm really excited about that. I also have a patio apricot here. Now these 2 are now ready to be hardened off and accustomed to outdoors, so I can take them home and pot them up. Well, these have to brave the weather at some point. It may as well be on a day like today. There. These 2 fruit trees, on the other hand, are fully hardy and have been out here all winter. So I have a plum tree and a morello cherry as well. So it's about time I took them home.
Now, last September, on a far sunnier day, Toby went to meet a passionate gardener who, through forensic planning and bold vision, is growing an extraordinary array of edibles.
Pineapples in the conservatory. That's an avocado in that planter. There's citrus in the courtyard. This is clearly a garden to whet the appetite. Cliff Curd grows enough produce in his 1-acre garden to open a market stall, or in his case, feed his family all year round. And I've come to find out some of the secrets of his success. What a garden you got.
Thank you very much indeed, yeah.
I mean, I've only just had a short walk up here, but I've seen so many edible, delicious delights. I mean, the list of what you grow, I mean, it's incredible.
It's quite a lot of stuff that's grown here. Everything from pineapples right the way through to radishes. Yeah.
And apples. So this is one of the jobs for today, I'm guessing.
When I came here, I really wanted to grow a great variety of apples. And in the garden here, I think I've got 16 varieties. But if you're growing a lot of apples, you need to grow them fairly close together.
Right.
And so I'm growing cordons here. The idea was to have a good mixture of eaters and some cookers as well. and to also have them so they're coming at different stages in the year. Beauty of Bath is the first one. That ripens really early in July. And we're just moving on now to Lord Lambourne, and then move on to Russets.
So I've got this right. You start the year at that end of the row.
That's right, yeah.
And you end the year or begin in January at the far end.
Yeah, the last ones are ready round about January, and they'll keep till February, March sort of time. We've got an awful lot of apples here, to be quite honest. The plan was to actually be able to feed myself and my family the whole year round, if possible. I think we possibly might just do.
Design-wise, did you get it right? Because obviously that apple at the start of the year, the Beauty of Bath, isn't closest to the house. For January, you've got to go even further into the bleak midwinter.
That's good thinking, but I don't think if I thought quite that much, actually, Toby. But that's very good thinking. Yes, yeah.
Soft fruit is a favourite of Cliff's, and his fruit cage is packed with everything from blueberries to blackberries.
It's magnificent.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's huge.
It's a bit overgrown, but it's got a lot of things in here.
But sometimes you need more than a fruit cage to protect a crop.
We've had a bit of a problem with the gooseberries. We had an insect called the gooseberry sawfly.
Of course, yeah.
And little caterpillars just eat the leaves. And I came up with the idea of using quail. The quail actually love gooseberry sawfly. They will actually jump up and pull them off the leaves. And the other great thing about them is they don't eat the fruit, but they do like to eat the weeds.
Quails, who knew?
In a garden so packed with edible delights, something's always going to want a share of the feast. But Cliff stays one step ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good plant, isn't it?
I've already picked over 100 big ripe figs from this brown turkey fig tree, which is pretty impressive, really.
God, I love figs. What are the bags about?
We have a lot of damage by blackbirds and wasps. What I do is I cover the figs before they actually start to ripen with a bag, and it actually protects them, but also allows you to look at the fig and then pick it when it's perfectly ripe. If you have a feel it's quite soft.
Nice and pappy.
Yeah, and you can actually see it's beginning to changed colour quite a bit.
And that's where the genius of having a clear bag comes in.
Yeah.
You can see what you got. Look at that. Oh, it's all glossy. Yeah, that's ready to go.
Wonderful.
You can have the larger off.
Oh, that's really kind, thank you. What a good man.
That's how I am.
Oh, cheers.
You know, getting them to ripen really well, that's such a good trick.
Yeah, it does work, and it's so easy to do, yeah.
With so much to harvest every week, Cliff's family regularly get roped in. Grandson Oliver has come to help with the almond crop.
What's the plan here then? What are we doing?
Well, you can see the nuts are really beginning to open, and that means they're basically ready to be harvested. We're going to give the tree a good shake first of all,
Right.
and the mature nuts will fall down, and then those that don't will probably bash the tree. Yeah, it's really sort of high tech, this bit here. And that's it, really. Oh wow, look at that. Well done.
It's quite a violent old process, this, isn't it?
Yes.
I'll tell you what, I'm glad I'm not standing there.
Yeah.
So, Ollie, what's better, weeding or picking almonds?
Picking almonds always.
I'm not a betting man, but I'd have put money on that.
Yeah.
Getting a good collection there, aren't we?
Well, this particular tree, robin, seems to work very well in this sort of climate in this country at the moment. Open up all these cuffs and take the nuts out.
Yeah.
And then we'll put them into a tray like this and leave it in a place where it's warm and dry, and just leave it there for about 6 weeks, something like that. And then they can become quite hard and they're not sticky anymore either.
Yeah.
So these will be ready for Christmas.
So I reckon you got a good bucket load on this tree. Is that a good harvest?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But when you've taken the husks off, it doesn't look that many. Yes.
Have you ever had that dream where you happily find a new room you didn't know you had in your house? Well, Cliff's Garden's like that. Every corner opens out into a new area, and not only that, it's filled with the most unusual plants. This is pineapple guava, And in the polytunnel, there's a taste of the unexpected. We eat a lot of curries in our house, and there's everything you'd want for one of those in here, as well as aubergines and tomatoes. There's flavourings from homegrown turmeric and ginger. They're just the roots bought from the supermarket and planted in the soil. I mean, Cliff, he's not just living the dream, he's dreaming up innovations. He's been here for 17 summers, and during that time he's tweaked his original designs. The fruit cage used to be covered in bird netting, but then the cats got in. So then on went the chicken wire, then the badgers got in. So he's got an armour plated. He's even pimped his polytunnel, adding a gutter around the outside. And this is really neat. How many of us built raised beds? Well, those timber posts in the corner, they won't last forever. And when they rot away, how about this for a neat idea? Angle irons knocked in the soil to hold in the sides. That'll last for years. See, it's not just food that comes out of this garden. A lot of food for thought has gone in.
Cliff's is the garden that just keeps on giving. And if the dream was self-sufficiency, I'd say he's achieved that in spades.
My new house is a short drive away from work. I moved in February, but the cold and wet weather hasn't really given me the opportunity to do very much, but that's okay. It's given me the time to think and to start making plans for the space I have. Spring is the perfect time to get to know a new garden, and my head's bursting with ideas. I can't wait to show you.
This is it. This is my garden. It's not very big. It's about 9 by 8 metres. And although it's not a blank canvas, it's got stuff in it, it is full of potential. So I'm really excited about putting my own stamp on it. But what I don't want to do is tear everything out and start again. I'm really enjoying at the moment just observing the space and seeing how it changes. It's east facing, so in the winter it's completely dark, no sun at all. And now suddenly it's full of light, so that's a surprise. But there's also some lovely stuff in here. The people who have lived here for years have obviously loved plants. So there's lots of different things, lots of roses, but also things like this beautiful newly planted ginkgo, which is a favourite tree of mine. It will get huge, but I think for a few years it can stay because it's really beautiful. And underneath it there's lots of daffodils that have been and gone. There's blackcurrants. Over here there's a little veg patch. There's some fennel in there. A little rhubarb's just started coming up. So observing a space before you just go in all guns blazing is so important. What is here is this huge bay tree. Now, I love bay, obviously it's a useful plant, so for me it should theoretically fit the bill, but in fact it is really quite big and overpowering in this space. So I think I'll just give it a bit of a chop back and keep it in check slightly. Now, you'll see here a little holly has seeded itself. Little now, but it will get much bigger. So the first thing I'm going to do really in the whole garden is just remove this. So it's just a case really, because I don't want this to survive, of sawing it as near to the base as I possibly can. There we go. It might seem really brutal and wasteful to cut down a tree like this, but those roots will be huge and entangled with the bay trees. Something that I love about this garden is that it has a pond already. I always love having a pond for the wildlife, and I never actually manage to put one in wherever I am because I always buy plants instead. So for me, the fact that this pond is already here is amazing because it means I can just work with it and maybe even make it bigger, who knows. This is something I'm quite excited about. It's a dark-leafed elder with pink flowers, and that's amazing for making pink elderflower cordial, so that's staying. And then there's this olive tree, which I've had for years, and my sister's been looking after for me, And now it has a permanent home, though I'm not exactly sure whereabouts in the garden it will be happiest. Generally they like dry, sunny spaces, and near Dartmoor in the wet, I'm sure it'll be fine. Now it's time for one of your films, and we meet a couple with a real flair for upcycling.
Hello, we are Carol
and Martin
Rayner from Colchester in Essex, and we'd like to show you our garden. So this is our pond, which is made from an old wheelbarrow. And then we've got lots of pots in the garden, most of which are recycled and reused, including some which we've got in a watering can there, and we've got some old toilet systems. This is our fabulous greenhouse that Martin made last year, which is all made from recycled materials. So this is a shower screen. We've got some old conservatory roofing, all built on a timber frame. This part is an old notice board. We built it last year, and this year we've filled it with lots and lots of different plants. So we've got some melon plants in there which are doing really well and look very happy, some cucumbers, some sweet potatoes which we've not grown before, and lots of different things, all growing very, very happily. So we hope if any of you are thinking about getting a greenhouse but have an unusual shaped garden, this might encourage you to think about just making one yourself to make it exactly how it works for you.
I have to say, Carol and Martin's greenhouse is amazing. I love the shower doors. Now, I have always wanted my own greenhouse, and that's the top of my wish list here. Now, obviously, I came here and I thought, you know, lovely wall, that would be perfect. But actually, that's a north-facing wall, and it really hardly ever gets sun at all. So it's a stupid place for a greenhouse that you want to be in a warm part of the garden, especially for growing things like tomatoes. So actually, this space gets the sun first thing in the year, and I imagine last thing in the autumn as well. So this might be the perfect spot, but I have to be aware of not impinging my neighbours when they're enjoying their spaces too. So, still mulling that one over. My mum and two of my grandparents were really keen gardeners. In fact, my granddad was even a grower during the war. But my love of gardening didn't really blossom until I was a late teenager. Luckily, now, if I ever want inspiration for my gardening, there are loads of places right on my doorstep I can go to. And one of them is Dartington Hall, just outside Totnes.
At the age of 19, I was working in a supermarket, and after a brief stint at art college, my life changed when a position came up as an apprentice gardener at the Salutation Garden in Kent.
Naturally, I thought that with a background in art, I'd be drawn to garden design. But in fact, the more I physically worked in the outdoors and the more I worked with plants, the more fascinated I became with botany. I've always been really struck by the idea that human endeavour can create something as beautiful as this.
But for me, it's not just about the alluring aesthetics of plants.
As beautiful as this magnolia is, it also is so much more than that. This heralds the beginning of spring. It's one of the first spring blossoms. And it's actually one of the first blossoms, first flowers ever to have evolved, even before bees. So it evolved to be pollinated by beetles instead. And you can eat the petals. They're really good when they're very young, so just in bud or having just opened. They taste very gingery, but the older they get a little bit more bitter. The thing I love is I've always been so drawn to plants that have function as well as just beauty. This is a sunny border that was created by Dorothy Elmhurst here nearly 100 years ago. And it's really gorgeous. It's just full of herbaceous perennials, lots and lots of flowers. It's going to look stunning as the year goes on. And it's how a lot of gardeners approach a border like this. It's full of beautiful plants. And I have massive admiration for anyone who can do that. For me though, I want to create something that's beautiful, but also functional. This is a bronze fennel, and it really sums up the whole ethos of something you can eat. You can eat the foliage, you can eat the seeds as well. The flowers are lovely and they're great for pollinators, especially for hoverflies. And it's that kind of idea that I want to create. Things that are useful, ethnobotanically they have an interest all through the garden. That's all the more important in a really small garden like mine, where every plant has to sort of justify its position, and if it can be multifunctional, that's really, really great, especially when space is very limited. This historic garden has such an aura about it, and especially when you're standing under this ancient yew tree, you feel it. This is about 1,500 at least years old. Isn't that just completely mind-blowing? And yew trees obviously have a lot of folklore about them, but they have uses as well. They were used to create longbows back in the day, and nowadays the American yew is actually used to create chemotherapy drugs, so not to be overlooked at all as a species, and really gives that sense of almost a monastic tradition of gardening, growing plants for use, which of course I love.
Gardens like this one at Dartington Hall aren't my only source of inspiration.
When I really want to switch off my brain from all the busyness of life, I always look to much wilder landscapes. When I do have spare time, I love getting out and exploring natural landscapes. I grew up in Kent, down on the coast there in the Garden of England, and then I moved to Scotland to study at the Botanic Gardens there in horticulture. And when I was up there, I loved exploring the Highlands, but now I'm here and I've got Dartmoor right on my doorstep. So if I ever need that fix of wild, rugged space, this is where I come, and it's just so beautiful. I never really did gardening at all as a child. That was very much my mum's domain, but had a real kind of immersion in wildlife and nature as a kid. So my grandma, she knew all of the mushrooms, and she used to take us into the woods and show us what they were. And my dad was an obsessive rock climber. So all family holidays as kids were camping near mountains and cliffs and playing in nature. And me and my sisters were always out kind of making camps and stuff. So although I didn't know the theory of the natural world at all as a young person, it sort of set me up to have a respect and a love for nature that's never left me. And now the more I learn about it, the more I learn about the mechanisms of the natural world and how it interacts with us and with everything else around, I get more and more respect and love for it, really. I feel very lucky to have had that. I love that humans are able to create beautiful gardens, but what really excites me is when human endeavour sort of clashes with the natural world. This is a quarry, so completely created by man, but nature is coming back in, and amongst all the old industrial detritus you can see planting that's happened on its own. So those birches that are just perched on the edge of the granite, they have hardly any root space. It stunts their growth, and when they hit the wind at the top of the quarry, that keeps them really, really short. But then some daffodils in amongst them that were probably planted by people, but maybe naturally occurred. And just seeing nature encroach on man-made spaces really excites me. Over the years, my love of gardening has allowed me to sort of reconnect with how we use plants in our daily lives. And I really want this slightly blank canvas of a space to be very natural feeling, so lots and lots of plants and not so much hard landscaping. But with any small garden, the real challenge is always in making these two things, useful plants and a wild feel like one cohesive design. But I really look forward to trying. I think it's about time I tackle these roses that I've inherited. And because I don't know what any of these roses are, I don't know how pruning is going to affect them in terms of flowering, but it does definitely need a good prune. So, firstly, with any pruning, but especially when things are a tangle, if you remove all of the dead material, that will help you just to be able to see what you're working with. So I can see this branch here. If I trace it back to here. Now, pruning roses is always something that's best done at the very end of winter, early spring, and usually something that you can be a lot more brutal with than you might think. So I always find the best thing to do is to really look at it, take a step back, have a really good look, work out how the branches are all intertwining, and then cut decisively. So I'll probably spend longer looking at something than I will actually doing the pruning. What you might find is if you do that, you might have less flower the first year, but you'll regenerate it so that it grows better the next year. So you can see there's some dead here. But rather than just cutting it here where the dead ends, instead I always follow it back to the main stem and make the cut there. But here, this main stem is actually some damage on it there and some dead on it here. And then if I follow that back, I can see it's also rubbing on this other branch as well. So actually, I'm going to make my cut right at that main framework. It will really neaten it up and make it clearer. Go. And you can see that by making really decisive cuts like that, you're quickly decongesting the whole rose. I'm not actually sure whether this rose is a climber or a rambler. Certainly something fairly big. It's not as drastic as it looks. I've actually got two branches tangled in here, but now I have to very carefully pull the cut one out without damaging the one that I want to remain and train into that gap there. There we go. So now you can see I've left one main stem, and that will give me a much neater, less congested framework for a healthier rose in future years. There, that is starting to look a lot better. Still to come on today's programme.
We meet a gardener with a passion for pots.
I'm known as a crazy pot lady. I think I'm kind of addicted to it. I can't really see a way of putting an end to it.
And a woman growing an unusual range of heirloom veg on a small urban plot in London.
This space is a little oasis in a concrete jungle, and it's been an absolutely magnificent way to engage the local community.
But now it's time for one of your films.
It's a beautiful April morning in central Bedfordshire. Hello, I'm Ron Whitlock and I'd like to welcome you to my garden. Over most of the 16 years that I've lived here with my partner Jane. She does the seed sowing and a lot of other jobs, and I do some of the heavy stuff. This is probably the best idea I ever had for the garden, and it's worked out brilliantly. It was a row here of about a dozen Leylandii trees, Cupressus leylandii, which everybody hates, and I've discovered that there's one wonderful thing about them, and that is that if you chop off the branches, they never grow anymore. They die off, and it produces what you might call a grow your own fence. And what I did here was to attach some gardening wire to some screw eyes and train these pears and apple tree and a cherry against those wires. The trees were taken down to fence height and every other tree was taken out. That's my best tip.
You really can be so creative with your boundaries, and I love what Ron did with his Leylandii. Very clever. Now, this rose is pretty much done, but I just need to tie the whole thing in. Before I do it though, I just have to head to my allotment. Come on, Roo. Now, if like me, space is at a real premium, then pots can be a great way to go in the garden. Next, we're off to meet a gardener in the Cotswolds who's taken container growing to the next level.
I think I've got around 500 pots on display at the moment, possibly. Hard to count. My name's Harriet Rycroft. I'm known as a crazy pot lady. I think I'm kind of addicted to it. I can't really see a way of putting an end to it. The main display is this big bank of pots near the back door. At the moment, the thing that attracts the most attention is the tulips, and tulips are probably my biggest gardening extravagance. I love trying new ones, and this blast of colour you get at this time of year when you're really hungry for colour after the winter, it's fantastic. This is Attila, and just look at the colour change trick. And they start off green, and then you just get this little tinge of colour, and then you get the full colour. When I do a display, I tend to put up a framework of evergreen plants. So I got lots of conifers, lots of evergreen shrubs, perennials that have a bit of presence over the winter. So you've got something to look at even before any of the bulbs come up. And then of course, boom, the flowers start to go one by one and you've got a firework display going on. I think the reason why I plant so many pots is that I really need to be able to see plants from the house. And we can't see the garden from the house at all. So it's just kind of evolved. I've got two main planting times. I plant in the autumn and late spring, early summer. I use a peat-free multi-purpose compost and I add a bit of slow-release fertiliser as I'm planting. As each season comes along, you think, oh, this is good. But at this time of year, it all starts to go too fast and things start going over and I'm thinking, oh, please slow down. It's a shame you don't have a kind of pause button. You can see here that in this pot, something has been eating my flowers. It's usually either a small slug or a small snail. I'm going to take the tatty flower off, but also I'm going to check inside the rim of the pot because the culprit is probably still there. Either inside the rim, here's a slug, or slugs are often underneath as well. So if you feel about underneath, so you need not to be squeamish about this kind of thing. Growing stuff in pots is never low maintenance. If you want to have lots and lots of pots, then you need to really enjoy gardening. Watering, I probably water this time of year maximum twice a week, really. If you're having to water a plant every single day, then it's in the wrong pot or it's in the wrong place. You want to put lots of water in for it to percolate down, for the roots to follow it down, and for the roots to colonise the whole of the pot, not just the surface of the compost. The plants do better if you arrange the pots in groups. to a certain extent, they kind of moderate their own little microclimate. So you get this whole unit that doesn't freeze and thaw as much. In the summer, it doesn't get so hot because they're shading each other. And so there's this kind of humidity around all the plants, and therefore they transpire less quickly. This is one of my favourite bits of the garden. I like to sit on the bench and just watch the foliage, see how it develops. Even something as ordinary as a little purple hazel given to me by the squirrels. I've got exciting things like Podophyllum spotty dotty, which is just a mad plant and I love it. Has very, very strange flowers underneath. And there's a Corydalis with it, the blue flowers. And underneath the trees, you have almost like your own little woodland floor. So you've got hostas, violas, some saxifrage there. You might think, oh no, I can't grow all my lovely flowery things here, but you can grow beautiful shade-loving plants, and they'll look better because they're happy. And a happy plant has its own beauty, I think. The grouping thing just really helps your plants to thrive, and it looks good, and you can play with it, you can adjust it. You know, you can bring something up higher. I'm a bit of a skip diver. I'll go and get bricks or whatever and build up little plinths for them to stand on. If you raise one up, you can get another one closer into it, and that's how you end up with 500 pots in your yard. It kind of snowballs because, you know, you see a nice plant, all your pots are full, so you need another pot. See a nice pot, might have to get another plant. Oh, that plant will look nice in it. So, you know, going shopping is dangerous. My husband has given up commenting, really.
Sounds like Harriet's husband is a wise man.
When I first started living in Devon, I was lucky enough to get an allotment, and it's been an absolute lifesaver. While I searched for a home I could afford, it allowed me some much-needed outdoor space to grow my own produce.
Welcome to my little allotment. It's a really small plot, so I've divided the whole thing into triangles to really maximise bed space and minimise path space. And the first triangle is the smallest. It's my cut flower triangle, but I love it, and it makes the whole plot so welcoming, especially when these beautiful seed heads are out. And this is my herbs and perennial veg. So I have a lovely big rosemary, some angelica, which is about to look magnificent, I think, but by far and away my favourite perennial veg is the perennial kale. I mean, this is about 2, maybe even 3 years old, and it's just gone on and on. You can harvest it all winter and all summer long as well, but I think it's really beautiful. Now, this section was supposed to be half fruit and half annual veg, but in fact the raspberries have taken over the whole thing. So I'm not getting rid of them, but they're going over there where they can no longer shade out the veg, and then this section here will be annual veg. And one of the key things that I did when I made this plot was to surround the whole thing with these chestnut posts. Because it's so small, I wanted to grow vertically to add a little bit more growing space. So I've got Japanese wineberry, loganberry, a grapevine, and even some small fruit trees that I'm going to tie in, and it just really maximises the ability to grow food here, which is, after all, what an allotment's all about. But I have to say, I absolutely love it here. It's properly my happy place. The other day when I came down here and did some weeding, I tried to move my wheelbarrow and found that actually my Japanese wineberry has layered itself between the wheel and the metal of the barrow. So where it's hit the ground, it's put on roots, which is actually amazing, and it's done it in 3 different places. So today my plan is to snip them off and put them up so I can tie in the wineberry and empty my wheelbarrow. Let's move that out of the way. And then it's just a case of digging them up. Well, it's well rooted, that's a good thing. This is a really beautiful fruiting plant, so high summer you'll get incredible iridescent red berries, and in the winter you have these really lovely red stems and red spines on the stems. The berry itself is tasty, but they're probably better in jam than they are for eating fresh, but they're so beautiful that they're really worth growing. But they tend to sort of walk around a little bit. Where they hit the ground, they put roots on, and then they'll move, so they're not hugely well behaved. But that's kind of fine here, because actually, as you can see, it's not well weeded. I let things stay for as long as they can to provide lots of habitat for creatures here, so this isn't an allotment that's pristine and perfect. I suspect the weather will water these ones in, but if not, a little bit of water each, and that is 3 incredibly healthy little cuttings of Japanese wineberry that I basically didn't have to do anything in order to achieve, which is always nice. I'm free! Well, my barrow is anyway. In that vein of keeping the allotment as wildlife friendly as I can, I always leave my grass seeds on for as long as physically possible. It's great for birds, for nesting, and for the seeds as well. But it's spring now, so it is absolutely time to take these seed heads off. This is Calamagrostis brachytricha, and it's one of my favourite ornamental grasses. I love having an allotment because on a day like today, when you're the only person here, you can really get some space from everything, space to think and just be. But when there are people here, allotment folk tend to be really lovely, and I just love being a part of this community. And in that sense, I have an awful lot in common with the woman in our next film.
This space is a little place of refuge. A little oasis in a concrete jungle. Hi, I'm Lady Lindsay, and welcome to my allotment garden. Well, when we moved into the borough, one of the things that we really wanted to do is have a little bit of an allotment where we could grow our own vegetables. And there was a scheme called Greening the Borough. We signed up, we went on the waiting list for a couple of years, and then we were offered this lovely site. We've been gardening here since 2014, and it's been an absolutely magnificent way to engage the local community. We grow all sorts of heirloom varieties, from tomatoes through to beans and gourds and courgettes and all sorts of things. On my mama's side, I come from a history of farmers, farming in Jamaica, so really it's in my DNA. My mama cultivated her own kitchen garden. She would send me out to go and pick tomatoes and peppers and all sorts of things. And after a while, I realised the value in those by the smell of the tomatoes and the plucking of the peppers and the sound of those things. Yeah, I think my love affair with tomatoes definitely began there. So this year I've grown 19 varieties of tomatoes, from dwarfs, cordons, indeterminates, and these wonderful garden gems are not only beautiful but absolutely exquisite in taste. I'm really fascinated and feel it's such an honour to grow heirlooms. The wonderful thing about heirloom varieties is that they have a legacy. Those seeds have been handed down over time. Having in your collection of seeds that are 600, 200, 300 years old, they carry a history and they've been passed down through families, through time immemorial, and I think that's the most wonderful thing. So this is one of the many heirloom varieties, tomatoes that I've been growing, and this one particularly is great fun. It's called Pocketbook Tomato. It's a great thing to grow in the garden for children. It's one whole tomato, but each individual nodule can be broken apart as if it was an individual tomato. So if you give a child this whole tomato, they can eat it as and when they're ready, which is just absolutely fantastic. Now this is my favourite tomato, Brad's Atomic Grape. It has the beautiful level of acidity and sweetness, gorgeous flesh, the perfect skin. It has these beautiful dark shoulders, and it's a beautiful stripy mix of yellow, green and a red bottom, and it's absolutely glorious. I'm going to open this for you to see. Look at that juice already, and as we open it, there it is. Absolute beauty. This year I've grown 5 different varieties of beetroot, and we're collecting the seeds from our albino beetroot. See, they're already beginning to fall. And these seeds are ripe for picking. I'm going to show you how I save my beetroot seeds. So now for the big lift. Let's go. Oh! Oh! There we are. First I'm going to cut right at the top of the plant. These ones at the top are absolutely ready for harvesting. These are all ready, they're dried out and they're ready to be sown. So these are Asian Molokai sweet potatoes, cultivated in Scotland, grown from slips in England. There's a good few in here. They're really lovely and long. I love a good runner bean, and this year I've grown blackcoat. And the reason why these are called blackcoat is shown in the coat of the bean. Aren't these magical? Now I would say that I am very much a part of this garden, and this garden is very much a part of me, and the community included, and that, I think, is something that I'm proud to have achieved.
To me, that garden really epitomises the idea of something being edible but also beautiful. Wasn't it stunning? It's the exact aesthetic I like. So my plan is to use edibles as much as I possibly can, but I'm going to think about them in a slightly different way and choose different plants that are better adapted to the conditions here, which, as you can see, is much more rainy and getting blasted by the wind. So the embryo of an idea I have at the moment is to create a sort of edible prairie, leave the grass unmown at the edges so it all bleeds into this long ornamental prairie but filled with edibles instead of just your classic prairie flowers. It's a bit of an experiment, but that's the beauty of owning a little garden, isn't it? That you can experiment as much as you like. Now, I have my 2 fruit trees, and I wouldn't normally plant anything in the rain like this because digging soil in the rain, it can be really damaging to its structure. But in this case, it's the lesser of 2 evils because the weather forecast is for high wind, and you can see this Mirabelle plum here is already really suffering with wind rock. As it's moving in its pot, the roots can snap and really damage the plant. I've tried to stake it in the pot, but it's not got enough purchase. So if I just heel it in the ground here, put that bamboo cane in much deeper, I'm hoping that will hold it still. It can weather the storm, and then I can put it in its final place when I've worked out where that will be. Oh, my sister has a huge head and she borrowed my hat. It's come back all stretched. I reckon and that'll do. Now, I potted this up because I bought it bare rooted, so I'm not expecting the compost will be very solid around it. Oh, good roots already. I'm really pleasantly surprised by that. And a worm. Okay, out of the way. There, that's already much better, but just belt and braces, I am going to put the stake into a slight angle, as deep as I can get it. Hopefully that'll keep it safe until the wind's blown through. Well, you may not be planting trees this weekend. If you are, hopefully it won't be in the rain like this. But here are some other things that you can be getting on with.
Ferns can look a bit scrappy at this time of year and often benefit from a quick tidy up. They're a great source of shelter for ladybirds and other insects over the winter, but now that the warm weather has arrived, they've done their job. Remove all the old foliage right back to the base to reveal the new shoots called croziers, just starting to emerge. April is the perfect month to get some courgettes on the go, and I like to start mine off in small pots of peat-free compost. I've chosen a variety called Gold Rush, which has bright yellow fruits. I sow 2 to a pot, just in case one doesn't germinate. Give them a good drink and keep them somewhere warm and light. Weeds can be a devil to get rid of in paths and patios, so now's the time to get on top of them before they get too big. Dandelions and docks are some of the worst offenders here, but with my special weeding tool, they don't stand a chance. It's a job I like to do little and often, whenever I get a spare 5 minutes.
Well there, I've spent a day discovering things about my garden, and this is a decent sized space and there's plenty to discover, so I'm really looking forward to that. But even this is a tree fern that I was convinced had died in the frost, and look at it, new croziers coming up, and this one appeared just this morning. So hopefully later in the year I can share even more of these things with you. But next week, we're back at Longmeadow at 9 PM with Monty. See you then.